What is scarier than one crazy driver with a gun? Two crazy drivers with a gun, said the Nassau County Sheriff about two Florida men accused of attempted murder after they shot at each other in a road rage incident, injuring their daughters in the process. The shocking incident unfolded on October the 8th of 2022 when 35-year-old William Hale attempted to run 43-year-old Frank Allison off the road on Highway 1 near Callahan. The two began swerving and brake-checking each other. At one point during the skirmish, Hale pulled his Dodge Ram pickup truck alongside Allison's Nissan Murano, rolled his window down and berated Allison while his wife gestured out the window. Hale then flung a water bottle into an open window of Allison's Nissan. At that point, Allison grabbed his gun and fired one shot at the truck before speeding off. The bullet hit Hale's daughter in the leg. When Hale realized that his child had been shot, he began speeding again to catch up with Allison. Hale consequently pulled out a gun and fired at least 7 rounds in the direction of the Nissan. The vehicle was hit with 3 bullets, one of which hit Allison's teen daughter, who was in the back seat. The bullet hit her in the back, causing a collapsed lung. The road rage eventually came to an end when the two drivers came across a patrol car and pulled over. The men got out and still argued with each other, but the deputy broke up the fight. Allison and Hale were both arrested and charged with attempted murder. The two girls were taken to the hospital. Unfortunately, both of their injuries were non-life-threatening. In April of 2023, the state's attorney released a statement indicating that Hale's aggressive driving pattern and the throwing of a water bottle placed the Allisons in fear of imminent death. Based on those findings, prosecutors determined that Allison had acted in self-defense and the charge against him was dropped. Hale, as the apparent instigator, would be arraigned on 3 counts of attempted murder, 3 counts of aggravated assault, and 1 count of throwing a deadly missile. That's not a pun. Number 9. Carlos Montavo Rivera. On June the 21st of 2023, 55-year-old Pennsylvania man Carlos Montavo Rivera was sentenced to life in prison plus 20 years for deliberately setting fire to his family's home and killing his wife in 2010. During the incident, Montavo Rivera's 3 children were in the Lancaster home as well. A neighbor overheard the children screaming and saved them from the fire. They were transported to a hospital in critical condition and survived. Their mother, Olga Sanchez Reyes, died from asphyxia, smoke inhalation, and thermal burns. Sanchez Reyes' death was ruled a homicide. When her husband was interviewed by investigators, he initially claimed that intruders had broken into their home in the early hours of December the 6th of 2010. He said he'd been sleeping when he awoke to the smell of smoke and the sound of his wife arguing with a man, at which point he said he'd been struck in the head and lost consciousness. Montavo Rivera told investigators he had awoken 45 minutes later to find his hands tied up and his home on fire. He further stated that the attack might have been retaliation for his wife's brother cooperating with the DEA in an unrelated case. However, Montavo Rivera kept changing his version of the facts on 4 separate occasions. Meaningful developments came about in 2019 when police interviewed a neurologist who'd examined Montavo Rivera's medical records. The neurologist told police that the man's account of being knocked out for 45 minutes did not match the physical injuries described in his records. The neurologist added that based on the lack of symptoms exhibited by Montavo Rivera, his version of what had happened was highly unlikely. Surveillance footage from the Lancaster Community Safety Coalition on the day of the fire also revealed that no one had entered or left the home prior to the fire. Police also interviewed the victim's sister, Dolores, who claimed that the couple had not been getting along at all. Dolores said that she'd witnessed an argument between her sister and Montavo Rivera, during which the latter yelled at the former, "I will kill you like a dog." According to a criminal complaint, investigators were led back to Montavo Rivera as the only person who possessed the motive and the opportunity to murder his wife. After a jury trial, he was convicted of first-degree murder, arson, risking catastrophe, and 3 counts of attempted criminal homicide. Number 8. Wendel Melton. 58-year-old Nevada man Wendel Melton, who reportedly killed his son for being gay, was sentenced to life behind bars with the possibility of parole After serving 28 years, the ordeal unfolded on November the 2nd of 2017 at Giovanni's Henderson apartment. Wendel shot his son and then immediately called law enforcement. He told police he'd shot his son during an argument over the young teen skipping school. He claimed that after Giovanni shoved him to the ground, he got up, pulled out his gun and accidentally shot the teen in the chest. Giovanni was taken to the hospital but succumbed to his injuries hours later. The victim's mother, Veronica, lamented, saying that the man had murdered their son because he was gay. Veronica also said that she was certain that Wendel would rather have a dead son than a gay son. Giovanni's brothers also stated that they'd seen Wendel pulling a gun on Giovanni once before when he caught him with his boyfriend. Wendel, who had a prior conviction for domestic battery, was charged with murder, illegal possession of a gun and child abuse. He was booked into jail on an $808,000 bond. Despite the horrific nature of the accusations, Wendel was eventually placed on house arrest. He maintained that the shooting was an accident and that he loved his son very much. Eventually, in May of 2022, a jury found the man guilty of murder with a deadly weapon and child abuse. Number 7. Blen Hoga. On August the 26th of 2023, a Virginia man was facing charges after he used a metal object to bash in the face of his son's youth soccer coach at a game in Manassas. 46-year-old Vince Villanueva was filling in for another coach with his team facing the Northern Virginia Soccer Club at George Hellwig Memorial Park. When Villanueva's team was losing, a father came over to talk to his son, who was part of the team. Villanueva subsequently placed the boy back into the game. The father, later identified as 45-year-old Blen Hoga, asked the coach if he could talk to him. Villanueva turned to speak with Hoga, but the next thing he knew, he was on the ground hearing a loud dinging noise after being hit in the head with an unidentified object multiple times. After the onslaught, Hoga fled on foot but was later located by police, who arrested him without incident. Villanueva was left swollen and bruised with bloodshot eyes, as well as cuts on his nose and face. A CT scan revealed that the victim had sustained a fracture to his orbital wall. Jail records indicated that Hoga was previously convicted. As of the latest updates, he was held in jail without bond on a charge of malicious wounding. In an interview, Villanueva said he never knew the father and wasn't exactly sure what had prompted the attack. Number 6. Michael Barbella and Michael Duffy. Two New Jersey men were arrested at a youth softball game in Salisbury, Maryland, after getting into a bloody brawl that started when one of their daughters was kicked off the softball team. The incident took place outside the Wicomico County Youth and Civic Center on July the 15th of 2015 and was caught on video. Earlier that day, 48-year-old Michael Barbella challenged 45-year-old Michael John Duffy to a fight via text. Barbella then drove from New Jersey to confront Duffy and other parents of players. When Barbella arrived, he approached Duffy, upon which an argument between them ensued. Apparently, the matter at hand was about Barbella's daughter no longer being on the team. Duffy told Barbella he was to blame for that. Footage showed the two men continuing their dispute until Duffy said, "You're not going away until someone punches you." That statement kicked off their scuffle, and the men started pushing each other, followed up by some punches getting thrown. The video ended with Duffy on top of Barbella punching him in the face as the latter's blood splattered on the ground. Both men were arrested on charges of assault, affray, and disorderly conduct. On August the 31st of 2015, the assault and affray charges were dropped after Barbella and Duffy pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct. Ultimately, they were sentenced to a year of probation and fined $100. Number 5. Carlson. When Carlson was confronted by his daughter regarding the murder of their family members, he simply told her that authorities still haven't caught him yet and added, "What makes you think they're going to get me now?" In 1991, Carl's 30-year-old wife Christina died, trapped in the bathroom of the couple's home in Murphys, California, after what was initially believed to be a faulty electric light ignited a fire. Carl was credited with saving their son and the couple's 2 daughters by getting them out of the burning home. The 31-year-old told police that he wasn't able to go back for his wife. Investigators initially listed Christina's official cause of death as an accident. Following the incident, Carl benefited from a $200,000 life insurance policy that he'd taken out for Christina 19 days before her death. 2 weeks later, he left California with his 3 children and bought a home in Varick, New York, where he eventually remarried. In 2008, Carl's son Levi, who was aged 23 at the time, was crushed to death while working on his father's truck. The truck fell off a single jack and landed on top of him. His death, like his mother's, was also ruled an accident. Soon after, Carl claimed his son's $700,000 life insurance policy, of which he was the sole beneficiary. Carl's second wife, Cindy, started suspecting that Carl might be responsible for Levi's death, but dismissed her suspicion at first. However, her unrelenting inkling allegedly began giving her panic attacks, which prompted her to hire a private investigator in 2011. That investigator found that Carl had taken out a large life insurance policy on her as well for a whopping $1.2 million. Fearing that her husband would kill her, she reported her concerns to authorities, prompting an investigation into the death of Levi. She helped the police by wearing a wire and speaking to Carl about Levi. In the recording, Carl admitted to removing his truck's front tires and raising it on a single jack before Levi volunteered to do the repairs. That recording gave police enough reason to arrest Carl, who admitted he'd been there when the truck fell on Levi, but he also maintained that it was an accident. Nevertheless, in November of 2013, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for 15 years to life in prison. Carl's daughter, Erin, visited him in prison and told him she'd always known that he'd been involved not only in her brother's death, but also her mother's. According to Erin, her father wouldn't own up to anything. However, after Carl was accused of Levi's murder, authorities in California reopened the investigation into his first wife's death in 1991. Through preserved records of the case, investigators determined that kerosene had been poured on the floor just before the fire had started. Additionally, they learned that Carl had covered the window days prior to the fire, making sure that Christina couldn't escape. In February of 2020, a jury found Carl guilty of first-degree murder of Christina. The following month, the man was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 4. Aaron Pennington. After 33-year-old Massachusetts woman Brianne Pennington was found dead inside her Gardner home on October the 22nd of 2023. Police learned that hours earlier, her husband wrote a chilling note that said, "Put a hole in her head." Officers had been called to the Cherry Street home at around 9 a.m. after the couple's 4 children went to their neighbors saying they couldn't find their father, Aaron, and that their mother was in her bedroom crying. Responding law enforcement found Brianne lifeless in an upstairs bedroom with an apparent gunshot wound to her face. Upon searching the residence, 3 spent shell casings were found in the bedroom, but no firearm was recovered. Investigators reviewed the neighbor's security footage to find the 33-year-old suspect exiting their driveway in a white 203 BMW at 8:50 a.m. on the day in question. Consequently, the police launched a manhunt for Aaron. The following afternoon, Aaron's vehicle was found abandoned about 1,500 feet into a local 585-acre scout camp called Camp Collier, with Aaron himself nowhere to be found. The man was initially facing a charge of possession of a firearm without a license to carry. However, a murder warrant was issued on October the 25th after investigators searched for certain content on his cell phone and found a disturbing message that was dated 7:04 p.m. the night before Brianne's murder. Part of the note stated, "If she wakes up, just say you're getting nasal spray. Get on side of bed, very close proximity to head. Put hole in her head." Further investigation revealed that the couple had been facing marital issues. Investigators learned that Brianne had been planning to move to Texas with her children to be away from Aaron, who suffered from mental health issues. As of mid-November of 2023, Aaron was still at large. The Air Force veteran was believed to be alive and on the run, potentially using his military training to survive and evade authorities. Number 3. David Contreras. At approximately 2 p.m. on November the 3rd of 2023, 52-year-old Florida man David Contreras shot his son, Eric, multiple times at their Kendall residence. NBC 6 South Florida reported that David then immediately called Miami-Dade police, informing them of what he'd done. Responding officers arrived at the home and found Eric suffering from a gunshot wound. Shortly after, the 21-year-old succumbed to his wounds. David was booked into the Turner Guilford Night Correctional Center on suspicion of murder. 2 days later, he appeared in court where the judge read the charge of second-degree murder with a weapon, noting that there would be no bond. According to David's attorney, the victim had suffered from severe emotional and mental conditions. However, Eric's fraternity brothers at his university remembered him as a caring man who'd been lighting up any room he was in. As of the latest updates, investigators were still trying to determine why the shooting happened, and it remains to be seen if they ever will, unless David decides to talk. Today's topic was requested by A Fallen Angel, Mead 8738, and Mayan 4397. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Osman Saptoage. After returning from their very first wedding anniversary getaway on December the 31st of 2019, Australian couple Veton and Lindita Musai were fatally shot by the latter's dad, Osman Saptoage. Osman had tormented his wife, son, and Lindita for most of their lives. In 2011, he had become estranged from his family. However, when Osman learned that his daughter had gotten married, he reported he felt disrespected that he wasn't informed and became enraged. He drove to the couple's home and lay in wait with his .38 caliber handgun for an hour or two. When Lindita and Veton finally arrived and were about to enter their home, Osman shot them in the back of their heads. When police and emergency services responded to the scene of the crime, Osman was found wounded in a nearby park and taken to an area hospital where he was charged with 2 counts of murder. Meanwhile, 25-year-old Lindita was declared dead at the scene, and 29-year-old Veton was rushed to a hospital but died the following day. During the court proceedings in December of 2021, Lindita's brother, Osman Saptoage, told the court that Osman was a monster who'd been hell-bent on vengeance against Lindita. Osman also detailed how he, his sister, and his mother had suffered abuse from their cruel and callous father since he could remember. Additionally, Osman stated that there was even an instance when Osman severed his own finger and mailed it to his estranged wife. In February of 2022, Saptoage was handed 2 life sentences after pleading guilty to the double murder. On April the 19th of 2023, Osman faced the Victorian Court of Appeal, where his lawyer argued that the 35-year jail sentence was excessive and that the man would likely die behind bars. One of the presiding judges said that for a pair of murders that were so bad that nothing but a life sentence was appropriate. A week later, the court delivered its judgment, rejecting Osman's appeal. Right after number 1, we will line up our previous extra long release about when relationships go wrong for those of you who feel like doing some They Will Kill You binging today. Stick around if you'd like. Number 1. Anthony Todd. When law enforcement conducted a welfare check at a residence in Celebration, Florida, the homeowner simply claimed that his children were at a sleepover, but officers quickly discovered a more gruesome truth upon entering the house. Police first visited the Disney Town home on December the 29th of 2019 after a relative called saying they were concerned after the father, 44-year-old Anthony Todd, told them that everyone in the family, including Anthony's wife, Megan, and their 3 children were sick with the flu. During that first welfare check, when officers received no response from anyone inside the house, they left. Nearly 2 weeks later, Anthony's sister called police, requesting to check on the family again, saying she hadn't heard from them. She also referenced a comment Megan had made about the world ending. When law enforcement turned up at the home that second time, they were answered by Anthony, He wandered out of the house shaking strangely, telling them the children were sleeping over at a friend's house and that his wife was asleep upstairs. When authorities entered the home, they discovered a pungent odor in beds throughout the house. Family members, including Anthony's wife and his 2 young sons, were discovered stabbed in their stomachs and smothered to death. The family dog was also found dead on the floor. Investigators initially couldn't find his preschool-aged daughter. After examining the wife's corpse, they also found her body decomposed beneath her feet. Anthony claimed an inability to recall the events of the ordeal. It remained unknown exactly when Anthony committed the murders and why he carried out the horrendous crimes. Investigators discovered that at the time he was heavily indebted to financial institutions and was under federal investigation for bilking Medicaid for services to patients who didn't exist. The man eventually confessed to murder but still didn't give a reason for the heinous crime. In 2022, Anthony was sentenced to life behind bars without the possibility of parole, with an additional year for animal cruelty charges for killing the family dog. Number 7. Joshua Incho. In August of 2016, 23-year-old Joshua Incho and his stepsister, Samantha Jean Hedger, went to a party in San Bernardino, California. Shortly after midnight, Incho got into a fight with another man. He pulled out a gun and pointed it at him. 22-year-old Hedger and another partygoer intervened and grabbed Incho. It was then that he shot Hedger, presumably by accident. Paramedics responding to the call at 2:22 a.m. pronounced the young woman dead. Incho fled the scene in a vehicle. A number of law enforcement teams, including the California Highway Patrol and a K-9 unit, mounted a search and found the man later that morning. Incho, who'd reportedly been hiding in a storm drain, was arrested and charged with murder. Number 6. Ayan Suru. In February of 2005, Turkish-Kurdish woman Ayan Suru was murdered in Berlin by her brother. Suru had been born in the German capital, but at the age of 16, her family sent her back to her ancestral village and forced her to marry a cousin. She gave birth to a son. Shortly afterwards, Suru divorced her cousin and moved out of her parents' home. After spending some time in a home for underage mothers, she got her own apartment and was training to become an electrician. She had reportedly started dating a German man. On February the 7th, at a bus stop near her home, Suru was shot in the head 3 times. Within a week of the killing, Berlin police arrested 3 of her brothers. Ayan, the youngest of them, confessed to the shooting while the others were acquitted. The stated reason was that his sister had brought shame to the family name. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison and following his release, in 2014 was deported to Turkey. There was a significant degree of public outrage in the aftermath of the 23-year-old's death, which was seen as a disregard of human rights. Surucu's family would once again receive backlash after applying for custody of her 6-year-old son. A Berlin court rejected their request and the child was placed with a foster family. Number 5. John Wright. In early July of 2019, a man fatally shot his sister and severely injured 3 others at a housewarming party in Texas. 48-year-old Juliana Carr and her family had just moved to a new home in Katy. Some sources reported that her brother, John Wright, was expected to live with them for a while. It might have been the root of the argument, but it's unclear what had prompted him to open fire on the group. One guest had managed to escape and they called 911. Carr, a mother of 2, died at the scene. After killing her, a few hours later, he too passed away at the hospital. 3 guests sustained gunshot injuries to the face, chest, and hand, respectively, but all were expected to survive. Number 4. Joseph Thomas NES. In May of 2021, a Minnesota man was charged with second-degree murder after firing numerous shots inside the Chanhassen home he shared with his parents and his sister. From his bedroom, 21-year-old Joseph Thomas NES shot across the hall into the room of his sister, Noelle, aged 25. Some evidence suggested that the woman was then executed at close range because 12 spent rifle casings were found near her bed. Noelle was later pronounced dead at the scene. The man's mother ran to a neighbor's home and they called 911. A separate call was placed by a different neighbor. Ness had walked onto her property urging her to call the police, saying that he'd killed his sister. He added that he was unarmed and that he wanted to surrender peacefully. The man was arrested and the police subsequently found hundreds of rifle casings inside the home. There were bullet holes in the walls and multiple windows had been shattered. The police discovered 6 rifles owned by Ness, including AR-15 and AK-47 variants, along with high-capacity drum magazines and ammunition. The investigation into the case is ongoing and Ness's motives remain to be determined. Number 3. Savannah Schmo. On August the 18th of 2016, Michigan teenager Savannah Schmo strangled his half-sister to death at the home they shared in Grand Rapids. 16-year-old Schmo and McKenna Hilton, aged 18, shared the same father. The relationship between him and Hilton's mother had had its share of problems, as the couple had separated and reconciled several times. These tensions are believed to have also affected the relationship between the half-siblings. Hilton's mother became increasingly worried as she wasn't able to reach her. She called her workplace at Target and was told she hadn't come in and that they weren't able to contact her. She then turned on the news to find that a dog walker had stumbled upon a young woman's body in a wooded area near Emerald Lake. Among the details regarding the victim's appearance, the report mentioned that she was wearing a Pandora bracelet with an owl pendant. It was the exact same bracelet that Hilton's mother had given her for graduation. She and the teen's father went to the police, where it was confirmed that Hilton had been killed. A series of interviews followed. The family initially didn't suspect Schmo, as he'd been consoling them and seemed deeply affected by Hilton's death. However, his story quickly began to unravel when he was pressed by investigators. He ultimately confessed to killing his sister and then dumping her body. As he went to trial, two sides emerged. Schmo's father and members on his side of the family stood by the teenager and asked for leniency, while Hilton's mother and her relatives demanded the maximum sentence. The teen pled guilty to first-degree premeditated murder in return for the prosecution not pursuing life without parole. Schmo, who never gave a reason for killing his half-sister, was sentenced to 40 to 100 years in prison. Number 2. Wasim Azim. Fazia Azim, better known to her followers as Kandil Balok, was a Pakistani model, actress, and one of the country's first social media celebrities. She became popular due to her pictures and videos, which often touched on various topics deemed outrageous and controversial by conservatives in the Pakistani community. Due to her unapologetic behavior, Balok was compared to Kim Kardashian by several international news outlets. Some of her followers praised the 26-year-old for going against societal conventions and living life on her own terms, but also for discussing topics like her rights as a Pakistani woman. The controversy that Balok had generated resulted in death threats, as well as the release of information showing her hometown and her father's name. By the summer of 2016, the influencer had told a media outlet that she no longer felt safe in Pakistan. Balok's father, Mohammed, had spoken in favor of her, lauding her bravery, while also claiming that she supported the family and her siblings. On July the 15th of 2016, while at her parents' house in Multan, Balok was drugged and killed by her brother Wasim. As the woman slept, he covered her mouth and nose until she succumbed to asphyxiation. A second sibling, Aslam Shaheen, was named as an accomplice for allegedly persuading Wasim to go through with the murder. Balok's body was discovered by her parents. The woman's father believed that she'd been killed for her money. However, in a press conference following his arrest, Wasim claimed that he was proud of killing his sister, describing it as a way of restoring honor to the family's name. He said that girls are born only to stay at home and to honor their families by respecting traditions. Wasim admitted to being a drug addict, but claimed he was sober when killing Balok. Her murder was condemned internationally by numerous public figures, including British Prime Minister Theresa May, Madonna, and Miley Cyrus. The murder reignited conversations regarding the way women were treated in Pakistan. According to the country's independent Human Rights Commission, roughly 1,100 honor killings had occurred in 2015 alone. Today's topic was requested by Gavin Todd. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 1. Dara Kelly. In early 2020, a Denver man stabbed his teenage sister to death and then dumped her body in a trash can outside their home in the Montavo neighborhood. The killer was identified as 25-year-old Dara Kelly, who according to his mother suffered from schizophrenia. Doorbell camera footage showed him dragging a black bag, which appeared to be heavy, and placing it in the trash can. The remains of his sister, 17-year-old Marnie Kelly Mills, were found inside, along with trash later identified as coming from Dara's room. She'd sustained fatal stabbing injuries to her neck. Neighbors claimed that the two often fought and that Dara had threatened to kill Marnie in the past, which caused the teenager to fear him. Dashorn didn't give a reason for the killing, but it's believed to have been connected to his mental health. In the aftermath, a candlelit vigil was held in front of the teenager's home.
Number 7. Robert Majika Jr. 24-year-old Robert Majika Jr. from Michigan was arrested in August of 2018 after the bodies of his sister and her boyfriend were discovered stuffed inside trash bags. Majika's father had filed 2 missing person reports on August the 25th of 2018 after his 18-year-old daughter Danielle and her 19-year-old boyfriend, Seren Bryan, had been missing for 2 days. The following night, the family's younger brother Kevin noticed a strange smell coming from the shed located in the backyard of their mobile home and went to investigate. Upon discovering the trash bags, he cut one open to see what had been generating such a horrid smell, only to find an arm inside of it. Once the police were called, Robert fled the home in his van to the Toledo bus station and hopped on a bus that took him to Cincinnati, Ohio, where police later tracked him down and arrested him. He was wearing a blonde wig, sunglasses, and a hat in an effort to avoid getting recognized. Not only was Robert charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, but he was also charged with premeditation when an investigation confirmed that certain items, such as a hammer, duct tape, and a shovel, had been previously obtained and that the crime scene had been strategically cleaned up. Robert's defense claimed that he was mentally ill, having previously been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. However, a mental health examination ordered by the court concluded that he was mentally sound to stand trial, to which the jury convicted him of first-degree murder. During the trial, Robert expressed no guilt for what he had done and refused to make a statement twice, leaving the motive for the murders unknown to this day. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Number 6. Imonte and Eric Morgan. On the 8th of August of 2021, 29-year-old Chicago police officer Ella French was performing a late-night traffic stop when she was shot and killed. She was the first officer who died by gunshot wound in Chicago since 2018 and the first female officer in 33 years to be fatally shot on the job. The car that she and her 2 partners stopped due to expired plates contained brothers Imonte and Eric Morgan. All 3 officers had their guns holstered when 21-year-old Imonte opened fire, shooting French once in the head, killing her and critically injuring one of French's fellow officers, Carlos Yanez Jr., who received bullets in the brain, eye, and shoulder. Imonte went on to exchange fire with the 3rd officer before handing the gun to 22-year-old Eric to continue the shootout. At some point during the exchange of bullets, backup was called, and the Morgan brothers were eventually overpowered and apprehended. Yanez was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, but ultimately recovered from his wounds. Imonte was faced with several charges, including first-degree murder, 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder of a peace officer, and aggravated unlawful use of a weapon. Eric was charged with unlawful use of a weapon and obstruction. The brothers have since been separated and taken to detention centers in different jurisdictions for security purposes. Number 5. Owen and Gary Shover. On the 13th of January of 2019, teenager Aranda Briones disappeared in Riverside, California, after 18-year-old Owen Shover, a friend from Moreno Valley High School, had allegedly dropped her off at a park. He claimed to have seen her get into a gray 4-door sedan, but the police's investigation of surveillance video discredited Shover's claim. Briones had gone missing that evening and remained missing for an entire month, before police were finally able to link Owen and his 21-year-old brother, Gary Shover, to her disappearance. Despite not having found her body, police had uncovered evidence suggesting that the teen had been murdered, and on the 11th of February of 2019, Owen was arrested on suspicion of murder while Gary was arrested on suspicion of second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit a crime. Both brothers pleaded not guilty to the charges but are being held in separate detention facilities without bail. A trial has yet to take place and Briones' body still has not been found. Number 4. Angel Alvarez. On the 8th of April of 2022, 22-year-old Angel Jose Alvarez, his 27-year-old brother Juan Diego Hernandez, and their 46-year-old mother Guadalupe Maria Davia Rodriguez were arrested for a crime that Alvarez committed 4 years earlier. On the 7th of June of 2018, two fishermen arrived at Osman Lake in Michigan to fish when they found blood on the dock along with a broken headlight and a blood-stained shirt. They called Oakland County authorities to report the scene, and when police arrived, they sent a dive team to search the lake after discovering drag marks and additional blood in the dirt that led to the end of the dock. The dive team retrieved the body of 20-year-old Emilio Valdez from the water. An autopsy revealed that Valdez was shot twice and had still been alive when he entered the lake. Valdez's sister reported that earlier on the same day he was killed, she saw her brother get into a black Pontiac Grand Prix and had heard gunshots ring out before the car sped off. She had been unable to get a hold of him since then. That same day, police received a call from Guadalupe Maria Davila Rodriguez reporting her Grand Prix stolen, unaware that her son Angel Alvarez had taken it. After the murder, Alvarez ditched the car, which contained a shell casing, blood, and Valdez's phone. Police found out that Alvarez and Valdez knew each other, and when they questioned Alvarez, he claimed he had no knowledge of the murder. Despite the fact that police believed Alvarez was somehow involved, the evidence they had at the time simply wasn't enough to arrest him. After 4 years of investigating the case, they finally gathered enough evidence to incriminate Alvarez. While a motive for the murder has not been disclosed, police believe that something went wrong between the two young men that led to the murder. He was charged with open murder and using a firearm in the commission of a felony. His brother Juan and mother Guadalupe were also arrested and charged with being accessories to open murder after the fact. Number 3. Samuel and David Rogers. On the 22nd of August of 2020, 26-year-old Thomas Rogers was killed by his two older brothers, 30-year-old Samuel Rogers and 32-year-old David Rogers, while he sat in his car in Birmingham, England. The three brothers, along with other family members, had allegedly been fighting for a number of reasons, which had resulted in Thomas no longer being on good terms with them. Samuel and David became increasingly hostile towards their younger brother due to the family's problems and eventually decided to attack him. They didn't keep it a secret either. The night before the murder, Thomas received text messages from David, threatening that he was going to come kill him. David and Samuel drove from Mansfield to Birmingham to carry out the attack. They found Thomas sitting in his parked car on the side of the street in broad daylight. They parked in front of him, got out and walked up to his car. While David stabbed him in the chest through the open window, Samuel recorded the assault on his cell phone. Afterwards, they quickly got back in their car and fled the scene, leaving Thomas to die. When emergency services arrived, they found Thomas lying in the street and rushed him to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. David was found guilty of murder and is serving a life sentence with a minimum term of 18 years in jail. Samuel was found guilty of manslaughter and is serving 9 years. Number 2. David and Ryan Campbell. On the 6th of May of 2021, brothers David and Ryan Campbell stabbed two men in an alley in the early hours of the morning. 22-year-old David and 17-year-old Ryan left their mother's apartment at around 2:30 a.m. to walk to a nearby store where they got into an argument with two random men. The argument escalated, and video surveillance that police later obtained showed the Campbell brothers stabbing both men multiple times and beating them up. They fled back to their mother's house where they left behind their bloody clothes. They told their mother that David had been stabbed in the leg and chest and that they were going to the hospital. In reality, they fled to California. When police arrived on the scene, they found one man lying on the floor surrounded by blood. The other man had managed to call for help and had already been driven to the hospital. Both men received emergency surgery, but only one of them survived. The other man, Francisco Pineda, died due to complications following the stabbing. The Campbell brothers were arrested in California on the 26th of May and were charged with battery with a deadly weapon, conspiracy to commit battery, attempted murder, and open murder. Number 1. Michael and Darius White. On the 13th of December of 2021, Annie Mae Smith, a 65-year-old woman from Virginia, was shot at a gas station during an attempted robbery. The perpetrators were 29-year-old Michael White and his 22-year-old brother, Darius White, who came up to Smith demanding her to hand over her wallet. During the interaction, 3 shots were fired, all of which hit Smith in the chest. Despite the efforts of emergency medical services, Smith was unable to recover and died at the scene. Both brothers had prior records and had been in and out of jail for years leading up to the incident. Michael had a previous felony conviction and 8 prior misdemeanor convictions. while Darius had 4 prior felony convictions and 5 misdemeanor convictions. In this case, they were both charged with first-degree murder, use of a firearm in commission of a felony, robbery with a firearm, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon.
Number 9. Jailia Stevens. In March of 2020, a woman attacked her brother with a knife following an argument at their house in Knoxville, Pittsburgh. The police were called to the residence shortly before midnight by 25-year-old Jailia Stevens. She admitted to throwing a knife at her brother, whose identity was kept private. The victim was taken to Mercy Hospital, where he was stabilized. He was conscious and able to give an account of the conflict, which seemed to differ from Stevens's report. According to her, the dispute had started after she'd complained to her brother that he didn't help out around the house. He'd allegedly spat in Stevens's face and yelled at her prior to pushing her. It was at that point that she allegedly picked up the knife, made several swiping motions in the air, and then threw it at him. However, the brother told officers that the dispute involved her asking for his money to pay the rent. In his version of the escalating conflict, she pulled out 5 kitchen knives and said, "You know how I get down," before stabbing him in the side of the head twice. It was his version of events that seemed to match the evidence. He did indeed have 2 stabbing injuries in his head, and there was no indication of him having initiated the aggression, neither from Stevens's physical health nor from material disturbance at the residence. Number 8. Savannah Ramirez. In 2013, an Arizona teenager accidentally shot her brother while posing with a firearm for a Facebook photo. 19-year-old Savannah Ramirez and Manuel Ortiz, aged 22, had returned to the Phoenix apartment they shared following a night of partying on New Year's Eve. They were with 2 other people whose names weren't released, and one of them allegedly pulled out a handgun. The siblings' social media profiles had already featured pictures of them posing with guns, including one in which Ortiz was pointing a gun at his head. It's unclear if anyone in the group knew the weapon was loaded. As Ramirez was playing with it at around 6 a.m., the weapon went off and a round struck Ortiz in the head, killing him instantly. When the police arrived, they found Ramirez sitting on a curb and crying. She admitted that she'd accidentally shot her brother. She was arrested, and if tests confirmed the presence of drugs or alcohol in her system, she faced manslaughter charges. Number 7. Abigail Contreras. On December the 17th of 2019, the City Hospital Emergency Care Center in Grand Prairie, Texas, called the police after a teenager had been brought to the emergency room with a severe stab wound. 18-year-old Nathanael Contreras and Abigail, his 20-year-old sister, had been in the same car. A fight broke out between the two, and from the driver's seat, Abigail stabbed her brother. She then drove him to the emergency room where the teen passed away. The root of the argument remains unknown, but Abigail was arrested on suspicion of murder and taken to the Grand Prairie Detention Center on a $200,000 bond. Number 6. Valley. In 2018, a woman tried to poison her brother, but ended up killing 3 more people in the Virudhunagar district of Tamil Nadu, India. The killer, only identified as 33-year-old Valley, had separated from her husband and was living at her parents' home. She was working at a printing press and had reportedly started seeing her employer. The woman's brother, 27-year-old Murugan, wanted Valley to put an end to the relationship, but she refused to do so. The man, who a local media outlet claims struggled with drug addiction, had also reportedly tried to assault his sister. Valley prepared a dish of chicken gravy for her brother, which she'd laced with pesticide. She then went to a temple with her mother. Upon their return, they found Murugan unconscious. He was rushed to the hospital and later pronounced dead. However, as they were all drinking together in Surakulam, Murugan had also served the dish to a number of his friends. 3 others aged 16, 20, and 22 died as a result. At least 6 more had fallen ill but were eventually stabilized. The authorities initially believed that they consumed tainted alcohol. However, evidence led them back to Valley, and she confessed to the crime. Number 5. Abdulia Sanchez. In 2017, Abdulia Sanchez was driving on the highway in Los Banos with her teenage sister and another teenager as passengers in a 2003 Buick. Sanchez, then in her late teens, was reportedly drunk and streaming video of the drive on Instagram. She lost control of the vehicle, which went through a barbed wire fence and flipped over. Her 14-year-old sister,
Jacqueline and 15-year-old Manuela Sager weren't wearing seatbelts at the moment of impact and were ejected from the vehicle. The accident is believed to have been captured in real time, as was its aftermath. Sager had suffered trauma to her leg, but Jacqueline's injuries were fatal. Sanchez reportedly kept filming after the crash, claiming that she'd be going to jail for life. She became increasingly distraught, eventually kneeling next to her sister's bloody, motionless body and urging her to wake up. She was sentenced to 6 years and 4 months for gross vehicular manslaughter, child endangerment, and driving under the influence. She was released after serving just 26 months. However, Sanchez would once again be in trouble with the law only a month after her release. The police spotted her driving with an expired registration tag and tried pulling her over. Sanchez, who was also driving on a revoked license, refused to do so and ran both a stop sign and a red light before crashing into an embankment. A male passenger fled the scene while a .45 caliber handgun was found in the glove compartment. Sanchez faced a number of charges, including invading police and parole violations, as well as possible weapons and traffic-related charges. Number 4. Kathleen Walsh. In October of 2008, 20-year-old Australian woman Kathleen Walsh brutally murdered her younger sister Susan. The relationship between the two had begun to deteriorate after Kathleen had stopped taking her medication. She was suffering from a condition called congenital adrenal hyperplasia, or CAH. It varies in severity, but it's known to be particularly hard on women, as they might struggle with excess body hair and a masculine appearance. One of the side effects of Kathleen's treatment was rapid weight gain, and she discontinued it in a bid to slim down. She'd done so on other occasions in the past, which her family claimed had resulted in extreme mood swings. By the time she'd murdered 18-year-old Susan in what some outlets described as a hormonal rage, Kathleen reportedly had the testosterone levels of an adult male. In the days leading up to the incident, they'd had a physical altercation and exchanged death threats over a hair straightener. A friend had reportedly managed to talk Kathleen out of killing her sister that night. There were also reports that she'd started researching knife wounds online and had learned to make the death quick by severing the carotid artery. After Susan had changed the password to the family computer, Kathleen made the decision to kill her. As the youngest sibling came out of the bathroom, she was stabbed over 50 times. Kathleen then called her father, reportedly telling him, "Daddy, I've stabbed Susan. I've got blood all over me." She subsequently pled guilty to manslaughter, but the court accepted that her mind state was altered at the time of the killing. She was sentenced to a minimum of 4 years. A few months after she'd been imprisoned, Kathleen died in prison of a pulmonary embolism, which was determined to have been a complication of her obesity. Number 3. Death of Paul and Jerry. In February of 2020, a man was beaten to death by his sisters at Mwimwutu village in Kenya. 51-year-old Paul and Jerry and his family were taking part in a goat-eating ceremony that preceded a dowry payment for his eldest sister. And Jerry had reportedly demanded a share of the dowry, causing 5 of his sisters, excluding the eldest, for whom the ceremony had been held, to attack him. The women ganged up and struck Jerry with sticks and firewood. Following the brutal beating, Jerry locked himself inside his house at his mother's compound. The following day, the sisters went to wake him, thinking he'd overslept. They discovered that Jerry had succumbed to his injuries. In the aftermath of the brutal slaying, they were all arrested. Today's topic was requested by Keenan Avdik. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Amanda Ramirez. In 2019, a New Jersey woman was arrested for killing her twin sister in a fight fueled by jealousy and alcohol. 27-year-old Amanda and Anna Ramirez had spent the night out drinking together. Only a few hours earlier, at about 3:45 a.m., Anna had uploaded a picture to her Facebook profile of them smiling in the company of friends. The twins started arguing after returning to their home in Camden. One member of their family claimed that the women had been fighting over Anna's boyfriend. There was speculation regarding a love triangle, but the man's relationship to Amanda remained unspecified. Others said that it was jealousy stemming from the fact that Anna was regarded as the pretty one. According to a police report, Anna had initiated the altercation by striking her sister in the face. Amanda went into the apartment and came out with a large kitchen knife. They started wrestling over it, but Amanda pushed her sister to the ground and fatally stabbed her in the chest. She was arrested and convicted. Amanda's family reportedly asked for leniency, and during the trial, she begged for their forgiveness. As per her sentence, she would have to spend a minimum of 5 years in prison before she'd be eligible for parole. Number 1. Shania Katwe. In April of 2021, Indian actress Shania Katwe was arrested in connection to the gruesome murder of her 32-year-old brother, Rakesh. Shania, who had previously also worked as a model, had started seeing Nayaz Ahmed Katigar, a realtor, in his early 20s. Rakesh was reportedly against the relationship, which allegedly prompted the couple to plan his murder. Katigar and several other accomplices attacked Rakesh at his Hubali home while Shania was visiting the city to promote a movie. Rakesh was strangled to death, then dismembered and burned. His severed head was found in the Devaragudihal forest. More of his badly charred remains were discovered in various areas of the city. The investigation is ongoing, and while it's unclear who exactly had masterminded the murder, the police believe Shania was directly involved in her brother's death.
Number 8. Marie Crabtree. A woman from Gold Coast, Australia, faced criminal charges in connection to the suspicious deaths of her teenage daughter and adult son, which had occurred in 2012 and 2017 respectively. The mother, alleged to have been involved in her children's killings, was Marie Crabtree, whose atrocious actions were described extensively during a committal hearing at Brisbane Magistrates Court in March of 2021. Crabtree, who had reportedly been charged with murder, attempted murder, torture, and fraud, was accused of repeatedly giving her children various prescription drugs that proved detrimental to their health and development. She'd allegedly given her son Jonathan, who was 26 at the time of his passing, smoothies laced with opioids on more than one occasion. An unidentified woman who claimed to have witnessed Crabtree's crimes firsthand told the court that the mother had administered dangerously high doses of pain medication that ultimately resulted in both of her children's deaths. The female witness reportedly served as a lookout while Crabtree concocted Jonathan's lethal smoothie, and she later recounted in court how she'd listened to the man make pained noises for 9 hours as he overdosed. It was initially thought that both Jonathan and his sister Erin had taken their own lives, but Crabtree was ultimately identified as the culprit. Number 7. Erin Garcia. In September of 2021, an 8-year-old girl was dragged alongside a moving vehicle for 300 feet as she attempted to stop her inebriated mother from driving. According to law enforcement in Placentia, California, Erin Garcia, aged 44, had gotten behind the wheel of her SUV in defiance of her concerned daughter's protest that she was too drunk to drive. At about 11:30 p.m., Garcia's daughter clutched the handle to the passenger side door to keep her mother from driving away. A male bystander also reportedly grabbed onto the vehicle, but Garcia accelerated nonetheless, pulling the man and her young daughter down the road for a distance nearly equivalent to the length of a football field. Police officers descended on Garcia's residence a short while later, at which point they found the intoxicated suspect hiding behind some bushes in the backyard. The woman allegedly kicked the officers as they attempted to take her into custody, but she was eventually brought to the station without further incident. Garcia ultimately faced charges of assault with a deadly weapon, child endangerment, and battery against a police officer. Both her daughter and the male bystander were taken to a nearby hospital with what were described as moderate injuries. Number 6. Courtney RK. In 2012, an Idaho woman was taken into police custody after reports surfaced that she'd engaged in intimate relations with multiple teenagers to whom she'd been acquainted through her oldest son. Upon investigating the woman's predatory behavior, the authorities discovered that Courtney RK, aged 35, had plied her victims with alcohol before having intercourse with them in her Kuna home. According to the arrest report, the woman's other son, aged 5, had at one point attempted to enter her bedroom during a rendezvous with one of the several teenage boys she was accused of victimizing. The child was unable to open the locked door, however, and RK allegedly ignored his cries for help, instead
opting to continue having relations with her elder son's friend. The mother of 2 was ultimately charged with 11 felony counts and an additional 7 misdemeanor counts, which included dispensing alcohol to minors. In June of 2013, Reshk was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole after 36 months. Number 5. Amber Stevenson. In June of 2015, a brawl broke out between 34-year-old Amber Stevenson and Rebecca Mills, aged 39, at a Walmart in Beech Grove, Indiana. According to eyewitnesses, Stevenson had instigated the physical encounter at about 10 p.m. and had even encouraged her 6-year-old son to aid her in her efforts of besting Mills during the fight. While speaking about the incident on a local radio program called The Smiley Morning Show, Stevenson claimed to have heard the other female shopper use a racial slur when referring to a store employee. Outraged, she subsequently confronted Mills about her offensive language, and a physical altercation ensued in the middle of the shampoo aisle. A bystander then took out his cell phone and began filming the 2 women as they fought. Concerned witnesses pleaded with them to stop as Stevenson's young son looked on while being in close proximity to the skirmish. As was shown in the video recording, Stevenson ultimately called upon her son for assistance after Mills had successfully pinned her to the ground. The boy proceeded to strike Mills several times and also threw shampoo bottles in her direction in an attempt to aid his mother. Beech Grove police were eventually called to the store, but no charges were issued at the scene to either of the women involved. One witness claimed to have observed responding officers laughing upon being shown the recording of the brawl. The employee, whom Mills had addressed in the moments leading up to the fight, denied that the woman had called her a racial epithet. Following an investigation by local authorities, Stevenson was arrested and charged with neglecting a dependent and contributing to the delinquency of a minor in relation to her son's involvement in the fight. Number 4. Edith Riddle. A Florida woman named Edith Riddle was arrested on child abuse charges after she'd allegedly beaten up her daughter's school rival on March the 18th of 2021. According to First Coast News, Riddle was wearing a boxing glove at the time of the attack. She claimed to have accidentally superglued the piece of fighting equipment to her wrist and was therefore unable to remove it. The police report detailed how the 34-year-old Jacksonville resident had just concluded a meeting with the vice principal of DuPont Middle School in the moments that preceded the attack. Riddle and her daughter were making their way off of school grounds when they confronted the victim outside the cafeteria. The woman's daughter initiated the physical altercation by pushing the young girl, who was described as the child's rival, and punching her repeatedly as she was lying on the ground. Riddle allegedly delivered several blows to the victim as well, bludgeoning the defenseless girl with the boxing glove. A teacher who'd witnessed the fight reportedly made a frantic announcement over the loudspeaker at 12:14 p.m. Shortly thereafter, a school safety officer arrived at the scene and broke up the altercation. Riddle, who was subsequently dubbed Boxing Glove Mom by the media, was taken into custody by Duval School Board Police. Number 3. Gulzar Ban. In September of 2021, a woman from Karnataka, India, was accused of murdering her own daughter in an effort to conceal the details of her extramarital affair. On the 5th of the month, local police recovered the body of Parveena Banu, aged 28, which they'd found in a dry well from a small village close to where the family lived. Although the authorities initially hypothesized that the woman had taken her own life, a post-mortem examination of Parveena's remains indicated that she'd been strangled to death. Investigators reviewed the victim's cell phone records, whereupon they discovered that she'd been in contact with her mother, Gulzar, and uncle, Payaregin, shortly before her death. Upon being pressed by detectives, both Gulzar and Payaregin confessed to have carried out Parveena's murder on September the 4th. According to the police superintendent of the Chikkabalapura district, Parveena had recently learned that her mother and uncle were having an affair. The pair thus plotted to kill the young woman in order to keep their relationship a secret from Gulzar's husband, Fayez. Payaregin had allegedly been the one to perpetrate the killing, which involved him strangling Parveena with a jacket. Gulzar successfully made her husband an accomplice after convincing him that she'd murdered their daughter for marrying a man from a different religion. Fires helped the two killers transport Parveena's body to the well, where she was later found by the police. All three of the victims' relatives were arrested and charged in connection to the murder. Today's topic was requested by Instagram follower Ariane Garrow. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comment section below, or follow us on Instagram and reach out to us there. Number 2. Marsha Edwards. A 58-year-old Georgia woman murdered her 2 adult children before taking her own life. In August of 2019, Marsha Edwards had owned and operated a medical supply equipment company in Atlanta for several years before her death. The Edwards family had long been regarded as a pillar of their local community in the suburb of Vinings. Prior to the sudden and violent change in her character, Edwards had reportedly established herself as a well-connected socialite, and by all accounts, had been beloved by many of those who knew her. It was reported that her ex-husband, a prominent Atlanta surgeon, had gone to dinner with their daughter Erin, aged 20, the night before the tragedy. The grieving man would later tell investigators that during the course of the final evening he shared with his daughter, there had been no indications that the young woman suspected herself to be in any kind of danger. On the day of the incident, Edwards had uploaded images of herself and her kids to Instagram, stated in the caption of the post that she could not ask for better children. The bodies of the 3 of them were ultimately found in the family's residence by Cobb County police officers at about 6 p.m. on August the 21st. The autopsy subsequently performed by the county coroner determined that Edwards had shot her 24-year-old son, Chris, a total of 5 times, while Erin had suffered 3 gunshot wounds of her own. After carrying out her children's murders, Edwards reportedly fired a single fatal round into her chest. The horrific incident shocked the community, but the motive for Edwards' actions remains unclear. Number 1. Donna Scrivo. A 61-year-old Michigan woman murdered and dismembered her adult son in January of 2014. During the criminal trial that followed the gruesome incident, the accused mother, Donna Scrivo, attempted to convince the jury that she'd been an innocent victim in the situation. Her defense attorney claimed that she'd been held hostage by an unidentified masked intruder. According to Scrivo's testimony, the supposed assailant had imprisoned her for a total of 5 days in her St. Clair Shores home. During that time frame, the intruder allegedly strangled the woman's 32-year-old son, Ramsey Scrivo, before mutilating the man's corpse. The defendant's version of the circumstances surrounding her son's death was firmly rejected by the jury assigned to her case. Scrivo was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder and other related charges. One of the crucial pieces of evidence that the prosecution had focused its attention on during the trial was a buzzsaw that Scrivo had allegedly purchased from a home improvement store. Investigators had established that the same saw had been used to cut up Ramsey's dead body. The dismembered portions were then placed in several trash bags and left on the side of the road at 4 separate locations. CCTV footage had captured Scrivo near the area where her son's discarded body parts were later found. Scrivo, who was a registered nurse, had also been Ramsey's certified caretaker, as the man reportedly suffered from a mental illness that left him unable to care for himself. His mother had allegedly tranquilized him with a dosage of Xanax before she strangled him to death and mutilated his remains.
Number 9. Lillian Shoemaker and Rachel Dungan.
Mississippi mother Rachel Dungan and her daughter Lillian Shoemaker were arrested while driving through Alabama, allegedly fleeing from justice after shooting the latter's boyfriend. The victim's name was not revealed to the media, but Jackson County Sheriff Mike Ezrell reported that 20-year-old Shoemaker had been at the man's house leading up to when the shooting occurred. Dungan, aged 38, picked her daughter up on the weekend of August the 13th of 2019, at which point the boyfriend allegedly attempted to follow them down the road. That's when Dungan began shooting at his car, inflicting non-fatal injuries on the victim. The mother-daughter duo were both charged with aggravated assault and were expected to be extradited back to Mississippi. Number 8. Lauren Victoria Alvarez and Tamara Ray Buck.
19-year-old Lauren Victoria Alvarez and her mother, 55-year-old Tamara Ray Buck, were arrested on September the 9th of 2020, whereupon they faced charges of second-degree battery. Buck and Alvarez, who were residents of Garland County, Arkansas, allegedly used a pipe that would usually be used to consume illegal substances to burn a disabled woman back in May of that same year. The victim, who was believed to be the daughter of one of Buck's ex-boyfriends, hadn't come forward with the accusations against her alleged attackers until June. She reportedly told police officers that during the course of the incident, the mother-daughter duo had taken turns holding her down on the bed, and that she'd received more than 7 burns to her chest and shoulders. Detectives handling the case indicating that they'd personally seen the injuries inflicted on the victim, who in the interest of privacy remained unidentified to the press in the aftermath. Both Alvarez and Buck were released on bail following their arrest, and as of September of 2020, no further information regarding court procedures had been released. Number 7. Cheryl and Jasmine Wright. On the night of October the 15th of 2021, Washington woman Cheryl Wright of Kentlands stabbed her boyfriend, Daniel Thompson, with the help of her daughter, Jasmine. As was detailed in subsequent reports on the matter, the victim had been 19 years older than his girlfriend-turned-attacker, who was 49 at the time. In the wake of the incident, Thompson was brought to the hospital for emergency treatment but ultimately succumbed to his injuries 2 days later. Although neither Wright nor her 31-year-old daughter provided police with particularly comprehensive accounts of the night in question, the detectives in charge of the case indicated that the suspects had gotten into an argument with Thompson before launching their attack on him. The police requested that anyone with information about the incident get in contact with Kentlands authorities. As of the case's latest updates, it had been reported that the Wrights had been charged with first and second-degree murder, but that a trial date hadn't yet been decided. Number 6. Tina Frey and Victoria Brimmer. Tina Frey and Victoria Brimmer, a mother and daughter from Lena, Louisiana, who worked together as dog trainers, were arrested and charged with aggravated cruelty to animals on August the 18th of 2022. Together, the pair owned Cypress Arrow Kennel and Canine Academy, where they reportedly trained dogs in addition to coaching other prospective instructors to conduct their own animal training. Police were contacted about the women after a video showing Frey, 52, and her 21-year-old daughter repeatedly striking a cane corso with a riding crop was uploaded to Facebook. Once authorities reviewed the shocking footage, both Frey and Brimmer were taken into police custody. The trainer's lawyer, Brad Drell, claimed that his clients were innocent, indicating that they were respected animal experts who were utilizing methods that were well established within the dog training profession. He further explained that although the video might look disturbing to the uninformed viewer, Frey had only acted in accordance with her experience with Corso dogs, which are known to be violent when she'd handled the animal so roughly. The abused dog in question reportedly had behavioral issues, and the trainers had been attempting to stop it from biting at its leash when the video was recorded. The presiding judge set a $10,000 bond, and both women were released pending their case's court proceedings. Number 5. Maria Turan and Camille Ergiles. Between 2011 and 2013, Maria Turan and her daughter Camille Ergiles allegedly injected clients with non-FDA approved Russian gel fillers at their medical spa in Houston, Texas. Although 50-year-old Turan wasn't a certified doctor, several patients who spoke to authorities during the ensuing investigation told detectives that she'd claimed to be one prior to treating them. A number of victims came forward, including an unidentified man who'd paid $3,100 for cosmetic enhancements to his buttocks, to which he reportedly developed a bad reaction, which consequently forced him to undergo further intensive medical procedures. In the aftermath of their arrest, Turan and Ergiles were charged with practicing medicine without a license, as well as delivering dangerous substances. Number 4. Lashuna and Abriana Taylor.
In the late summer of 2022, Lashuna Taylor, aged 41, and her daughter, 19-year-old Abriana, faced several criminal charges including aggravated robbery, contributing to the delinquency of a minor, intentionally evading arrest in an automobile, and child endangerment. The women from Memphis, Tennessee had reportedly enlisted 2 teenagers to aid them in their crime spree, which started at 2 p.m. on August the 7th. Police responded to several emergency calls, including a laundromat owner who had been shot in the arm and multiple men who'd been robbed at gunpoint. Witnesses described seeing 2 women fleeing the scene in a Hyundai Sonata before their teenaged accomplices jumped into a nearby canal. Once police tracked down the car in question, though, only Abriana remained inside. She'd led cops on a wild chase that culminated with her rear-ending a truck, leaving her own vehicle disabled. The teen was arrested on the spot while her young associates were captured about an hour later, and Lashuna shortly after that. As of the case's most recent updates, the suspects' trial dates hadn't yet been determined. Number 3. Kay and Kimberly Morrison. In early January of 2022, Kay Morrison allegedly murdered her ex-husband, Kenneth, with the aid of their shared adult daughter, Kimberly. The victim wasn't officially reported as missing until March, when his concerned son contacted the police in Nez Perce County, Idaho, to report that his father hadn't been seen for about 2 months. While conducting interviews with the victim's family, an investigator reportedly noticed that 81-year-old Kay had been referring to her ex-husband in the past tense and consequently grew suspicious that she might know more than she was letting on. The authorities subsequently obtained search warrants for Kay's phone and text messages, as well as those of the couple's daughter Kimberly. Joe Storms, the detective in charge of the investigation, later reported that it had been evident by the content of the messages that both women were planning in concert with one another to poison Kenneth Morrison with prescription medication without his knowledge. During an interrogation conducted after her ensuing arrest, Kimberly told the police that her mother had been spiking her father's tea with lorazepam for years, but that she'd begun increasing the dosage near the end of 2021. Meanwhile, Kay allegedly confessed to placing a bag over her former husband's head after he'd fainted from the drugs she'd given him, which blocked his airways and ultimately led to his death. Presiding Judge Karen Subert set a $1 million bond for each defendant, and a court hearing was scheduled to begin toward the end of 2022. Today's topic was requested by Austria Giancarlo. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Heidi Marie Littlefield and Logan Marie Runyon. On January the 14th of 2021, Francis Kelly texted his estranged girlfriend, Heidi Marie Littlefield, accusing her of spiking his oatmeal. Apparently, it wasn't the first time he suspected her of poisoning his meals during the course of the bitter child custody battle in which they'd been embroiled. The following day, Kelly was found dead in his Indiana apartment by the mother of another one of his children. Detectives working the case discovered the damning text exchanges between the victim and his ex, one of which read, "You were in my fridge last night, and it tasted funny after a couple of bites, and now I am lightheaded." The autopsy revealed he had been dosed with fentanyl before being strangled with his favorite tie. 41-year-old Littlefield was initially the only suspect, but after the police began interviewing friends and family members, the woman's 22-year-old daughter Logan Marie Runyon and her 29-year-old boyfriend Robert James Walker were also arrested in connection to the crime. Allegedly, one of Littlefield's former partners informed detectives that she'd admitted to paying her daughter's boyfriend $2,500 to find someone who'd commit Kelly's murder. Runyon ultimately agreed to testify against her mother in exchange for a reduced sentence of 26 years. She claimed that she and her boyfriend had actually used the $2,500 to acquire illegal substances, as well as pay for clothes, and had never truly intended to murder Kelly. In May of 2021, Walker, who admitted to sneaking into the victim's apartment with Littlefield after the drugs had taken effect, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and was sent to prison for 10 years as part of a plea bargain. The man placed the entirety of the blame onto Littlefield, stating that when he refused to snap Kelly's neck as she requested, she'd used the tie to end her ex's life herself.
On August the 23rd of 2022, Littlefield was found guilty of murder, as well as several other felony charges, and her sentencing was set for October of that same year. Number 1. Denise and Latoya Gay. A mother and daughter duo from Henrico County, Virginia conspired to kill 19-year-old Martre Coles on March the 12th of 2017. Denise Gay, aged 49, had been dating Coles' father for several years, during which they reportedly resided with each other's children. While living with the Coles family, Gay's daughter Latoya and her teenage sister had a history of aggression against the young man they'd eventually plot to murder. After Coles had been granted an interview as part of his efforts to get into an arts college, he enlisted Gay's help to create a plaster mask, which was one of the requirements mentioned in the admittance letter. Instead of rendering aid as the young man had requested, Gay and her eldest daughter began suffocating him. Coles struggled, prompting the mother to sit directly on top of him and apply plaster to his face until he eventually died of asphyxiation. The victim was reported missing shortly thereafter, and an investigation into his whereabouts was subsequently launched. About 2 weeks later, detectives discovered Coles' body inside a plastic container near the two families' shared home. Lime was also discovered near the teen's corpse, which had been used in an alleged attempt to destroy evidence. Police set up a hidden camera at the site, hoping to capture the culprit returning to the burial scene. Gay ended up on the resulting recording, searching for Coles' body, which had already been removed by the authorities. The woman was arrested and her home was searched, whereupon evidence was found linking the mother and daughter to the crime. Investigators also uncovered text messages in which Gay and Latoya had discussed changing the location of the body. Information discovered in the former's computer revealed that she'd faked the victim's college admittance letters, as well as the plaster mask requirement, to get him in a vulnerable situation that would allow them to carry out his killing. Although the mother and daughter were both found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, the jury was hung when it came to the charges of murder in the first degree, and a mistrial was thus declared in December of 2017. The women were subsequently tried separately, which led to Latoya receiving 30 years in prison for the crime, while her mother was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 8. Laura Rose Carroll and Emily Rose Grover. A Florida school official named Laura Rose Carroll was arrested along with her daughter in March of 2021 following a scandal that made national headlines. The 50-year-old reportedly served as the assistant principal at Bellevue Elementary School in Pensacola and was therefore granted access to the district's student data system. The state's Department of Law Enforcement announced that Carroll had taken advantage of her position to rig her daughter's high school homecoming queen election. An arrest report detailed how both Carroll and her daughter, Emily Rose Grover, had taken part in the scheme. The two allegedly used the school district's student information system, called Focus, to cast fake votes for Grover in the popularity contest, which she ultimately won. Although it initially seemed as though their ploy had been successful, the election software flagged hundreds of votes as fraudulent, and Escambia County School District officials subsequently contacted law enforcement. The district's student council coordinator was also notified that witnesses had allegedly heard Grover talking about her and her mother's efforts to rig the election. An official investigation into the matter uncovered that Carroll and Grover had cast a total of 246 fake votes in the latter's favor. It was also determined that Grover had exploited her mother's district-level access to the data system to view grades, medical records, and test scores for other students. In the wake of her arrest, the 17-year-old was immediately expelled from Tate High School, and it was also reported that Carroll had been suspended from her position. Prosecutors stated that the mother and daughter each faced a maximum prison sentence of 16 years if convicted of their various criminal charges. Number 7. Tracy and Julia Bari. Police officers were dispatched to a bar in Destin, Florida, in response to reports that two women had gotten into a shouting match with employees in the early morning hours of April the 13th of 2018. The dispute's main instigators were identified as mother and daughter Tracy and Julia Bari, who worked together as local realtors. As was reported by the Northwest Florida Daily News,
The two women had become agitated while the bartender was preparing their drinks and proceeded to yell at other employees that they were taking too long to serve them. As the mother and daughter were being removed from the establishment, they violently took out their frustration on multiple staff members. 24-year-old Julia reportedly struck one worker several times, causing visible discoloration to their face. Upon the arrival of law enforcement, Tracy and her daughter were placed in handcuffs, at which point they shifted their aggression towards the officers. An arrest report detailed how the 47-year-old mother had kicked one of the deputies in the leg. Once the suspects had been placed in the patrol car, they attempted to force their way out by kicking the window and gouging it with their steel cuffs, which reportedly left a number of deep scratches on the glass. In the end, the women were both charged with misdemeanor battery, while Tracy also received a felony charge of resisting an officer with violence. Number 6. Kathleen and Riley Wells. On the night of June the 6th of 2019, Florida woman Kathleen Wells and her daughter Riley were kicked out of a Claremont bar for causing a disturbance that resulted in one of their friends requiring hospitalization. The two women subsequently summoned a Lyft driver to take them home. When they arrived at their residence, however, the mother and daughter, aged 41 and 21 respectively, refused to exit the vehicle. Their obstinate behavior eventually subsided and they agreed to get out of the car, reportedly abandoning their possessions in the back seat. According to the Lyft driver's testimony, Kathleen and Riley immediately began arguing loudly with one another upon exiting the vehicle. The commotion soon caught the attention of some of their neighbors, one of whom contacted the police. By the time officers arrived at the scene, the two women had moved the row inside the house. Law enforcement came upon them screaming at each other amid crying children and other family members. The rest of the family eventually calmed down and went to bed at the officers' behest, but Kathleen and Riley continued to yell. Their refusal to cooperate with law enforcement and de-escalate the situation resulted in them being taken into custody and booked into the Lake County Jail. Number 5. Shelly Lynn Gemberlin and Alicia Nicole Scarduzio. In the afternoon of September the 19th of 2017, Emily Bailey was stopped at a traffic light near the intersection of Little Road and Trouble Creek Road in Newport Richey, Florida. As she waited for the light to turn green, mother and daughter Shelly Lynn Gemberlin and Alicia Nicole Scarduzio pulled up alongside her. The two parties became embroiled in a heated argument that was reportedly connected to an earlier traffic incident. Gemberlin and Scarduzio shouted a series of expletive-laden threats at Bailey before they eventually exited their vehicle and approached her open driver's side window. As was later corroborated by several eyewitnesses, Bailey told investigators that the two women had grabbed her by the hair and neck before pulling her out onto the street. They then proceeded to viciously beat her until she lost consciousness. Among other injuries, Bailey reportedly suffered a broken nose in the attack. After the local authorities had been alerted, the violent mother-daughter duo were arrested and charged with burglary and aggravated battery. Number 4. Xiomara and Jennifer Quintanilla. On the evening of February the 6th of 2017, Texas woman Xiomara Quintanilla and her daughter Jennifer attempted to walk out of a Target in North Harris County with a shopping cart full of unpaid merchandise. The women were stopped by a loss prevention officer who'd watched and pushed a loaded cart past the checkout counters without paying. Jennifer was detained by the officer without incident, but her mother reportedly began launching various items from the cart at Target employees. Subsequent reports detailed how Xiomara's rampage continued, with her approaching one of the store's officers and striking her in the face. She then fled to the parking lot but wasn't able to reach her car and leave the scene, as police officers had already arrived to take her and her daughter into custody. The two women were both charged with robbery and were booked into the Harris County Jail with a $10,000 bond. Number 3. Casey and Julie Garcia. A mother and daughter from Texas conspired to exploit the scant levels of security present on the campus of Garcia Enriquez Middle School in San Elizondo in June of 2021. As detailed by local police, Casey Garcia dyed her hair and used a skin tanner in an attempt to make herself look more like her daughter, Julie. The 30-year-old then went to the school and pretended to be Julie, using a mask to conceal most of her face. School district officials reported that Casey provided the campus's security guards with her daughter's unique ID number, and signed her name in order to be allowed into the building. As the mother had captured in a video later posted to social media, she greeted various other students in the hallway and attended her daughter's classes throughout much of the day. It wasn't until one of the afternoon classes that the woman was finally noticed by staff, at which point she reportedly turned herself into the principal's office. Local authorities were notified of the situation, and following an investigation, 2 warrants were issued for Casey's arrest. The woman posted a video to YouTube in which she explained her rationale for the illegal stunt, claiming it was done as a social experiment to test the security at her daughter's school. Upon being taken into custody, she was charged with criminal trespass and tampering with government records. The superintendent of the San Elizero Independent School District revealed that they'd be reviewing and revamping their security measures in light of the incident. Today's topic was requested by Brenda Warren. If you have any other topics you would like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Anne and Jennifer Dodge. In August of 2017, undercover police officers in Sarasota, Florida, staged a sting operation that targeted a mother and daughter suspected of running an unlicensed erotic massage parlor. Police officials detailed how 55-year-old Anne Dodge and her daughter Jennifer, aged 30, offered $120 massages online, which they performed in a carport set up outside their suburban home. The pair were also alleged to have provided escort services for an elevated fee of $200. An undercover officer responded to an ad that the 2 women had posted on Backpage.com. One of them gave the officer an unlicensed massage, at which point the authorities were authorized to conduct a raid on the residence. Investigators reportedly found massage tables, lotions, oils, and a towel steamer inside the house, and the 2 women were taken into custody. Anne maintained that she was a licensed massage therapist whom God had ordained to bring healing energy to her clients. Despite her claims of innocence, the mother was charged with 2 felony counts of unlicensed practice of a healthcare profession and 2 misdemeanor counts of operating a massage parlor without a license. Her daughter was charged in connection to the alleged escort services they were provided. When interviewed by the police, neighbors revealed that roughly 5 to 10 cars would come to the Dodges' residence on a daily basis, describing most of the visitors as older men. Number 1. Libby Adame and Alicia Galath. On October 15th of 2019, California woman Carissa Raj Paul died after undergoing a failed cosmetic surgical procedure. The 26-year-old's official cause of death was listed as homicide by acute cardiopulmonary dysfunction and intramuscular silicone injections. Local authorities identified the 2 individuals who carried out the surgery as the primary suspects in the murder investigation. It subsequently emerged that Libby Adame and Alicia Galath, a mother and daughter from Los Angeles, had performed the procedure illegally inside their home. Investigators concluded that the 2 women, who'd allegedly presented themselves as qualified specialists, had injected Raj Paul with materials commonly used by cosmetic professionals. However, they'd mistakenly mixed them with dangerous chemicals, and the combination of substances proved fatal for Raj Paul, who authorities stated had come to the US from South Africa with the intention of pursuing a career in the adult film industry. Adame and Galath, aged 51 and 23 respectively, were both arrested in August of 2021 and charged with murder. They reportedly had their first appearance in court in February of 2022. Number 7. Brittany Simpson. On April the 1st of 2019, Brittany Simpson was sentenced to 18 years in prison for murdering her father after he'd evicted her. The 31-year-old had been living rent-free at her parents' home in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, up until May of 2017, when they demanded she find residence elsewhere. In previous years, Simpson had reportedly helped pay for expenses, but her increasingly erratic behavior was a source of concern for her senior citizen parents. 5 days after her abrupt eviction, the woman snuck into the family home through the back door and fatally shot her father, Robert Simpson, who was 66 at the time. Following the shooting, Simpson allegedly changed clothes and put all evidence of the crime in a backpack, which she then threw into a creek nearby. This wasn't the first instance of violence in the Simpson household. More than 50 911 calls were made from the residence between 2007 and the time of the murder.
Simpson had reportedly been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and her mental health issues began to make her behavior unpredictable. Facing a potential 30-year prison sentence, Simpson ultimately agreed to a deal with the prosecution, entering an Alford plea to voluntary manslaughter, which indicated that she refused to admit guilt but acknowledged that there was enough evidence to be convicted at trial. Number 6. Odessa Carey. 73-year-old Odessa Carey was murdered on April the 7th of 2019 by her daughter, who shared her name. The 36-year-old Carey was not subjected to a regular court case in the aftermath, but instead faced what is known in the UK as trial of the facts. In such procedures, when the defendant is determined to have a mental condition that renders them unable to understand the consequences of their actions, jurors aren't expected to deliver a verdict of guilty or innocent. Instead, they are asked to choose between discharge, supervision order, or hospitalization. Carey reportedly suffered from a treatment-resistant type of schizophrenia and had, following her incarceration, asked relatives about her mother's whereabouts, despite having killed the woman herself. The victim's body was discovered by police officers at her Northumberland, England residence. Her abdomen had been sliced open and her head was missing. Several tools used during the murder were found in the bathtub, including scissors, knives, and a mallet. A family friend testified that Carey the Younger had arrived at their house carrying a bag containing the victim's head and that she'd kissed it before hiding it under the sink. The witness didn't call police that day, claiming to have had no access to a phone. Instead, they visited a pub and confided in a friend, who contacted authorities the following day. Following Carey's trial of the facts, the jury determined that she had, without a shadow of a doubt, murdered her mother. The troubled woman was consequently sent to a secure psychiatric facility for treatment, as well as to ensure the safety of the general public. Number 5. Rachel Scarlett Mullenix. On September the 13th of 2006, Rachel Mullenix used a pair of knives to fatally stab her mother, Barbara Ann, over 50 times. The victim's mutilated body was discovered at her home in Newport Harbor, California. She was reportedly 56 years of age when her daughter brutally attacked her with the help of 23-year-old Ian Wesley Allen, her boyfriend. The incident had allegedly been sparked by an argument regarding Rachel breaking curfew. The two perpetrators fled the state in the aftermath before being apprehended by the police in Louisiana 2 days later. During the ensuing trial, prosecutors showed evidence that depicted the visceral brutality of the attack, including the killer's decision to use a butter knife to pierce the victim's eye. Rachel admitted to conspiracy to commit murder, as well as covering up the crime, but attempted to shift the brunt of the blame towards Allen, claiming he was the only one who carried out the fatal assault itself. Her father testified on her behalf, claiming that his ex-wife had been an angry drunk and that he believed his daughter's claims of innocence. Nevertheless, on October the 9th of 2008, Rachel was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Her boyfriend received the same sentence 1 month later. Number 4. Cheyenne Jessie. Florida woman Cheyenne Jessie murdered her 50-year-old father, Mark Weekly, as well as her daughter Meredith, before placing their remains in plastic bags and hiding them in a neighbor's shed. The victims had last been seen on July the 18th of 2008, but 25-year-old Cheyenne reported them missing a week later, claiming that her father had kidnapped Meredith and run off to Georgia. Police were suspicious of the young woman from the start of their investigation, immediately noting several holes in her story. She reportedly claimed that her father had told her about his plan via text, explaining that he only had a year to live and wanted to spend it with his granddaughter. Cheyenne's cover-up story failed to hold over the authorities for long, as investigators discovered the victims' corpses after noticing a potent stench in the area where they'd been hidden. Both bodies had sustained 3 gunshot wounds and over 12 lacerations inflicted by a sharp-edged implement. When confronted with the evidence, Cheyenne admitted to having murdered her daughter because she was getting in the way of a new relationship. Weekly had reportedly attempted to intervene on his granddaughter's behalf, but was then slain himself. Cheyenne's boyfriend testified that she'd asked him how long bodies would take to decompose. Although he claimed not to have suspected any wrongdoing on her part at the time, Cheyenne was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder on July the 17th of 2019 and was consequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 3. Jessica Hannon. On July the 16th of 2021, Jessica Hannon unleashed a brutal attack on her mother, Michelle, while intoxicated. The incident occurred during 49-year-old Michelle's engagement party in the town of Risca, Wales. In the preceding moments, Jessica's boyfriend had been asked to leave the family gathering after allegedly causing a commotion. Furious, 28-year-old Jessica proceeded to shove her mother onto the kitchen floor, kicking and punching the bride-to-be. Michelle managed to escape the room, but her daughter quickly pursued her before throwing 2 bottles of champagne at the window. The glass shards struck Michelle in the face, causing a 2-inch V-shaped laceration to the cheek, which required stitches to mend. The victim testified during her daughter's eventual trial, revealing that she'd been left permanently scarred by the attack and had lost sensation in her face in the aftermath. Jessica pleaded guilty to a charge of wounding and was sentenced by Judge Nicholas Parry to a suspended 8-month jail sentence. She was ordered to attend a 15-day rehabilitation program, as well as refrain from consuming alcohol for 90 days. Judge Parry also granted Michelle a 3-year restraining order against her pugnacious daughter. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Or follow us on Instagram and reach out to us there. Number 2. Sonia Whitten. After repeatedly stabbing her 77-year-old father, Jeffrey, Englishwoman Sonia Whitten was sentenced to 10 years in prison plus 4 years of supervised release. The grisly attack took place on November the 8th of 2015, when 47-year-old Whitten arrived at her father's Burntwood home wearing a balaclava and carrying a knife. She immediately began stabbing the man in front of his grandson, while allegedly screaming, "Die, die, die." Although he sustained severe wounds to the torso, neck and arms, Jeffrey miraculously survived the assault after being rushed to the hospital, where he underwent emergency surgery. He'd reportedly been stabbed 22 times and would remain in intensive care for 12 days before being released. During the case's subsequent trial, the victim testified that he hadn't been aware of the assailant's identity until she spoke, saying, "It was only then that I thought to myself, oh my God, it's my daughter." Sonia's defense attorney, Christopher Clark, attempted to mitigate the extent of his client's culpability, claiming that she'd been under the influence of illegal substances at the time and that she'd tried to take her own life after the attack. The woman ultimately agreed to a plea deal with prosecutors to avoid receiving a harsher sentence. Number 1. Sofia Negroponte. Sofia Negroponte was accused of fatally stabbing a man in her Rockville, Maryland apartment on February the 13th of 2020. The woman was one of the 5 adopted children of former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Negroponte, who also served as Secretary of State to George W. Bush. Sofia, who was 27 at the time of the incident, had gotten into an argument with former schoolmate Yusuf Rasmussen, aged 24. The disagreement escalated to the extent that Sofia brandished a knife, which she used to stab the victim in the neck, killing him instantly. She allegedly apologized as she lay on top of his body and made no attempts to flee the scene. The young woman was charged with first-degree murder, but her father spoke to the judge on her behalf, claiming she had a history of substance abuse. The former government official promised the court that he'd ensure his daughter stayed out of trouble if she was released under his care. However, she was remanded into custody without bail. Sofia's trial date was delayed due to COVID restrictions, and the case's first hearing was rescheduled to December of 2022. Thanks for watching. Would you cut ties with your father if he murdered an innocent person in a drunken act of rage? Let us know in the comments section below.